Hello, friends, and thank you for joining us in the sixth episode of Invisible Activity. We've come so far. I'm your host, Gabriel, and this is a podcast dedicated to giving a platform to independent artists, writers, community leaders, and otherwise interesting people with something to say. We wish to cover art and ideas that focus on engaging community, addressing issues of justice and social reform, and help us imagine how tomorrow can be a little different. In this episode, I'm going to be talking with my new friend, Elizabeth Burke-Dain, as she walks me through the advice that she has to give to emerging artists and art spaces. This is a great time to start an art space or an art community project, but like any other organization out there, you're going to need two very important things: public interest and some money. How do you go about that? The same kind of question can be said for young, bright-eyed artists like me. How do we get to that gallery owner to notice our work? How do we get to that meeting with that collector or curator? Whether you're just a young painter like me, or you're the proud founder of your neighborhood's new artist-run gallery, you're going to need to master the art of the elevator speech. Elizabeth is here to walk me through her system. But first, let's take a quick look at her credentials. Elizabeth is a specialist at taking organizations to the next level by working with world-class branding and design agencies to create dynamic visual identities. She even gives me a few good examples of that, actually. She has a proven track record of reinvigorating mission-based organizations with innovative programming, media partnerships, social media campaigns, and other content that speaks to and engages with new audiences. She has worked with the Poetry Foundation and Poetry Magazine, Columbia College of Chicago, the Art Institute of Chicago, the University of Chicago, and has been the co-founder of Around the Coyote, a Chicago-wide arts event. If you're from Wicker Park, you probably know about that one. And by the way, Elizabeth is open to any new clients seeking help with their mission statement and public profile. If you would like her help, you can find the links to her contact info in the video description, along with a list of resources and examples from our conversation. And while you're down there, make sure you follow us on social media and check out Compound Yellow's website. Let's give it a go and start to listen. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so in the short version, who are you? How did you get here? And why do you do what you do?
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Elizabeth Burke-Dain. For most of my career, I've worked as a PR and communications person for different institutions, mainly educational institutions. And basically, to boil it down to my elevator pitch about what I do now as a consultant is I help artists and cultural institutions create language and visual identities or brands and messages that resonate with new audiences, the media, and potential funders.
Mm-hmm. So for you, I mean, it's the business is to get that gallery, to get that 501c3 funding, or to get that museum to reach that new audience, or, you know, am I touching the right spot here? Yeah.
Yeah. When I worked for a number of years at the Poetry Foundation as the director of media and marketing, and the mission statement at the Poetry Foundation was to create a more vigorous presence for poetry in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So a very broad statement.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I did, and I think this is true of a lot of institutions who have a strong mission statement, is that you have to ask yourself the question, is this program, is this advertisement, is this partnership speaking to the mission? Is it on brand?
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, when I was working there, I wouldn't necessarily work with a tech company unless they were doing something with poetry that would help advance the mission.
Right.
I helped them recreate a new brand identity. So when I first got there, mm-hmm. all of the different programs had a different sort of look and feel. So the overall Poetry Foundation had a a logo that had Eric Gill designed it. So Gill, Gill Sands, the typeface. Everything had been, designed by Eric Gill.
Right.
And the magazine had a completely different look and feel. And then another program we had called Poetry Out Loud had a completely different look and feel.
And that's
so
not
all
good.
of our
Yeah.
Sorry?
So that's not good when you have all these related things with the same mission looking so differently or having so many different feels.
Yeah. I think the reason for that is that it doesn't create a cohesive message. Again, it goes back to messaging, visual messaging.
Yes.
If you look at Slack, for instance, every Slack product is going to have that same, you're going to know that that's a Slack product.
Right.
So with the Poetry Foundation, many people didn't know that Poetry Magazine was a part of the foundation, or they didn't know that Poetry Out Loud was part of the foundation.
Exactly.
So I worked with the great design and branding guru, Michael Beirut, out of Pentagram Design. Yes, he was a student of Massimo Vignelli. He's an Italian-American designer. Yeah, he did the whole subway system, New York subway system.
Right, yes.
Right, so he sort of brought Helvetica into the world. It was a very democratic font. It could be used in anything. It could be seen from far away. It could be seen close up.
And he designed the most beautiful metro train map, only to be backstabbed and have it thrown away years later.
Yeah. Well, Michael Beirut studied at the knee, if you will, of Massimo Vignelli. And so Michael Beirut went on to create the identity for the New York Times, the new identity for the New York Times. He did the identity for MIT Media Lab, for the Museum of Modern Art. He did Hillary Clinton's entire identity. You remember it was the one with the arrow? So it was an H with an arrow.
Yeah, I'm with her.
It was a beautifully flexible design. So it could be applied to different images, but you always knew that's the Hillary Clinton. So when I worked with him, he was a poetry enthusiast, which we didn't know when I first started working with him. He was really into poetry. He came up with, I think, something like 7 different treatments for the design. And the one we chose, which I'll leave you a link or something. The one we ended up choosing was grid. So it was POETRY in a grid.
Yes.
And that grid could be applied to anything at that you would understand that was the Poetry Foundation and Poetry Magazine identity.
Like Poetry Mag or Poetry Foundation, poetry, whatever, it could fit on the grid.
It could fit on the grid. So as that brand evolved, you could put smiley faces in each of those, and you would still know that was a Poetry Foundation property.
Because it's important that people associate, everything that you're doing with you.
Yes.
And within a second's glance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the magazine, all of the brochures that we created, everything fell within that grid design. And the underlying concept behind that grid is that it communicated that poetry could be anything. It had, within that grid, an infinite number of possibilities for how poetry is looked at, perceived, read. You could put, so what the magazine, which has the most flexible part of the design, and I worked with Fred Suzaki, he was the art director for the magazine, and had always done these beautiful covers using different artists every single month. And he did beautiful covers, but the problem is it didn't relate back to the parent organization or Poetry Foundation. So we chose the design that we did because then he could still continue to work with different artists, is that they would just have to work within that grid format. So
Right.
they could come up with some crazy looking P and a beautiful O and a lovely E
Right.
and a luxurious T, and using different artists each month. And so it created this element of surprise that every month you would see a different way that poetry was communicated. And so
Right.
that again came into the underlying concept that poetry can be anything. Poetry can be skywriting, poetry can be, a rhyming meter.
Mhm.
It can be contemporary. So Michael Beirut did an amazing job in helping us, and he continues, I believe. I'm not at the Poetry Foundation anymore, but it was a great solution for the foundation and for the
Mhm.
magazine is over 100 years old.
Right.
Started in 1914. But the foundation itself is only about 12 or 15
Mhm.
years old. So I think that there was maybe some growing pains and how you marry that
Mhm.
storied, historic magazine that first published, T.S. Eliot, and was where the poem Chicago by Carl Sandburg appeared.
Mhm.
It's an amazing magazine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it just comes to show all you said about how all the thought that goes into what the people could perceive as just the simplest design, and the purpose it serves is absolutely imperative, even though most people don't realize how much of a visual identity makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
or fits in, or how big of a part it is on an organization's or a person's brand. You know,
Yeah.
I used to
Yeah.
be part of this community of people in YouTube and social media that were very big into studying ancient religions, ancient mysticism, and all that. And a lot of their publications were designed sort of in this very new agey sort of conspiracy theory, ancient aliens kind of aesthetic. And they were like, I don't know, why aren't people taking us that seriously? And I was like seriously telling them, I was like, guys, like, it doesn't, like, the look of your books, the look of the articles, everything screams, I'm not serious, even though they were very serious people. These people had like degrees, these people had peer-reviewed research going on, and like but they were just like, I can't understand it. Like, it's so important. Just
Yeah.
that 1 second, that 1 second glance at your organization is the make it or break it for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of organizations, or most people, don't who are outside of the branding and design worlds,
Yeah.
don't really understand that a logo is not just a pretty picture
Mm-hmm.
with pretty colors.
Yeah.
That, I mean, again, you take something like, look at Slack again. Slack, they have that beautiful sort of colorful paralleled lines.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an underlying concept to that, which means we work in both verticals and horizontals. We help
Mm-hmm.
you with, organizing the different communication processes and groups within an organization. We keep you organized,
Right.
essentially. We keep you from having to deal with email, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is one of their best things. I'm
Right.
a big fan of Slack. And that it's like a puzzle piece. So Slack can interface with a lot of different other programs,
Mm-hmm.
communications and project management programs. So their logo communicates that very quickly.
Yeah. And now you work with museums and arts organizations and all that, and you've dedicated to giving your services to these places. Can you tell me what it's like to work with these people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have a business partner, and I'm a principal of her small boutique agency, which is called Christensen Gray. And
Mm-hmm.
her name is Amy Christensen. So call out to my friend, my girl, Amy. So if you ever wanted to work with us, you would look for Christensen Gray
And I'll leave the contact info
media.
in the description, so
Yeah, we'll leave that there.
and everything. Yeah.
So, we do a lot of different work kind of work, usually it's when an organization wants to, they feel that they're perceived in a certain way, and they don't want to be perceived in that way. They want to be perceived more on a national level, or they want to be perceived by the public as a contemporary arts organization, as opposed to maybe a school, or people don't understand the breadth of their programs and possibilities.
And a lot of the times this means the difference between getting a grant or not, or between getting donors or board members or not.
Yeah. Well, it can mean, yes, it can mean, for instance, some organizations who have a huge exhibition space might just be perceived as a small community arts center in another city, for instance. And they really want to be kind of a player, maybe not on the level of like a museum of modern art, but maybe on a level of, oh God, what's the name of that? Dia.
Yeah, Dia.
Dia. Right. People want to be like Dia. They want to be considered more like Dia. Well, how did Dia get to be Dia?
Well, they bought a whole lot of land. That's the first step.
Well, they had a lot of money.
Yeah. Step one for Dia.
It's not always just money. I mean, it's the whole way in which they present themselves.
Yeah.
They present themselves in a way that says, we are a serious arts organization. We can attract, they're not doing, I mean, I use this as, it's an example, and I don't mean to derogate anyone, but, a lot of these arts organizations are sort of considered maybe places where kids can get face painting, and they can, but what they might not know is that they're bringing in really serious artists into the organization and having these exhibitions, but maybe they need to stop doing the face painting, or maybe they need to really focus on all that really high level stuff. And what I do is help them weed out the things that are not communicating them properly, not communicating them in terms of their goal image that they want to portray. And a lot of times, like the Poetry Foundation, it might be that their visual presence is just not communicating who they want to be.
Exactly.
So we sort of get into long conversations about, where do you want to be? Who do you want to be like? What reviewers or reporters do you want writing about you? And where do you want to be? Do you still want to do this education program? Do you still want to do these things that are sort of bringing you down to a place that you don't really want to be? And many times this is very controversial, because you've got a board and you have a lot of people that are like, but I like the face painting, like that's the best. And are you really willing to change? And I think sometimes places really, they think they want to change, but sometimes they don't. And if they really don't want to change, how do you make the most of who you are?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we go on a kind of exploration. Yeah.
Change is never just a coat of paint or just making the walls white or doing that. I mean, it's making essential changes to how your community is run, who is going to come into your space, how are they going to interact with it. I mean, it's sort of behind a visual change and everything comes a structural change that's kind of like the equivalent of, I don't know, like demolishing a whole building and building it up again or something like that.
Yeah. Or really, I think one of the mistakes that organizations make when they feel that they're not getting what they want is they add another program. They just keep stuffing programs in thinking that it's going to change the DNA or it's going to bring in new people. But it's my experience that it's more just weeding things out.
Right.
What is this program? And is it, go back to that mission statement again. Is it serving your mission? And is it serving your long-term goals?
Mm-hmm.
And you have people on your board that don't want to get rid of those things. So it becomes,
a lot of the time, a lot of times the board members are there to fund the activities that they don't want to get rid of. Like the board member will be like, wait, but I'm the one who supplies all the face paint. I'm the guy who gets the painter to come here. Like if we get rid of the face painting, I have to leave, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you try to convince them in a way that makes sense to everybody. How to get lean and mean around your mission and around where you want to go. And that's a real challenge. There's, when we do a number of things. So we work with, most of the time it's just, we have these big events coming up and we don't have a PR person. Can you promote this? Can you get stories placed? And can you write a press release? And the interesting thing about that is that is really the worst way. It's the worst way to work with a PR person, because your press release has to be larded with all of your goals. It doesn't seem like it does, but a long conversation really needs to happen about who you are. Is this exhibition or activity really going to feed where you want to be? And how do you want to talk about it so that you get those target publications interested in you?
Right.
We talk about what publications do you want to be? Well, we want to be in the New York Times.
Yeah, or Hyperallergic, or
Yeah, we want to be in ArtNet.
Them big news websites,
Yeah, but what does a hyperallergic article? What is that made up of? What does that mean?
Yeah.
So you have an exhibition, but is that going to be of interest to hyperallergic? And which writer do you want to attract?
Exactly.
So sometimes if you're trying to get yourself to a certain place, you want to be able to design what it is that you're doing to make those things happen, to attract the people you're interested in attracting. And it's not going to happen all at once. But how do you take those steps that you're always moving toward that goal? You're always thinking about that goal and how you are communicating to the public around those goals.
Right. And I mean, when it comes to, the reason I kind of wanted to do this podcast in the first place was because now in the post-COVID world that we all inhabit this, there's a new art scene that's starting to come up, and I think a lot of new artists and new small independent organizations are coming up, and I wanted this podcast to be sort of a bank of information for people that are just starting a new organization, and they have to contend with probably not having a lot of expertise because it's a homegrown thing, and they have to contend with comparing to very large organizations, like, for example, DIA, Glenstone, MoMA, Met, whatever. How do they get into hyperallergic? How do they get an article in the New York Times? How do they get, what would you have to say for these younger people that are just starting to like eke out a little space or a little mission,
Well, it's always going to be the same. I think you have to ask yourself a few basic questions.
Right.
Who are you right now? Be very real with yourself. Right now, I don't know what the situation is with an organization you might be working with, but how do you think the public sees you now? Who is your audience? Who comes to your events?
Right.
And how do you make those people ambassadors of your brand?
Right. So not just incomers and interested people, but evangelists of who you are.
Yeah. How do you create a movement
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a movement? Is there, what are you dedicated to?
Right.
And so you want to figure out who your audience is, because those are the first adopters. They're the ones that are going to be able to say to their friends, hey, this guy's doing this interesting thing. You might be interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
Come along and check it out. And what is the message you want to convey to the culture and audience you want to reach?
Mm-hmm.
If we unpack that a little bit, what is the message you want to convey to the culture? That's a really hard question. Yes. What do you want? I mean, obviously the more niche you can become, the more focused and targeted you can be, the better. I want to, as an example, maybe I want to exhibit artists who want to design everyday objects for the new millennium or something, made out of clay, like everyone, or whatever it is, like that's super niche.
Mm-hmm.
But the nicheness is sometimes good because everyone understands, oh, those are the clay people that are making designs out of clay. You know, that's people, you filled that bucket, right?
Right. The clay folk.
Yeah, the clay people. And how do you make yourself different from others? You know, how do you make what you're doing distinctive from other arts organizations?
Mm-hmm.
How do you address the art you're exhibiting?
So
That's
it's
different.
like, so it's like not only are we the clay people, we're the clay people who use traditional Aztec and Mayan, methods of pottery or whatever, instead of just a general clay thing, whatever, right?
Right. Yeah. Or, the other thing is you might only show conceptual ceramics, or you may only show conceptual artwork in general. I know, like at Compound Yellow, Laura always does a great job of sort of bringing in the most experimental, out there kind of social justice artwork. Sometimes it doesn't even have an object
Exactly.
attached to it.
One time she brought me in, and I think that it was the first time I talked with Laura, and she was giving me a tour of all the artwork that was there, and then we were going through the yard, and she's like, here's all the artwork, and I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, what? And then she like, no, wait, I'm sorry. Then she like picked up a bunch of leaves. This was like in October, and she picked up a bunch of leaves, and she's like, see, there's a bunch of little clay things down there, you can see it. It's like,
no, and I hope that Laura can be more success, gain more, not success, I don't mean to say that, but I just want her to keep on doing what she's doing.
yes, I think it's a successful model. It just needs more doing.
Yeah, and she needs a lot of help. And so then from some of these that you could, how have you crafted your mission statement, I think is another really important component of having an organization, because you have to be able to go back to your goalpost. You sort of look at the mission statement as your goalpost. Who are you is, what are you dedicated to?
Right.
How do you make that dedication occur? And why are you important within the larger cultural world?
Mm-hmm.
And I think many arts organizations end up making these sort of manifestos, around I think a manifesto is really good, but I think you have to be able to make something very almost vague and specific at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I love going in and talking to arts organizations to help them craft new mission statements. Because I'll go in and I'll just ask like 10 like very basic questions, and the staff are the people who really need to be answering those questions, because they're the closest to the product, the closest to the activity, they're the closest to the audience. And then you sort of hear things being repeated, and you cull all those things together, and you kind of weave together a very concise, maybe 2 or 3 sentence, if that, mission statement. You look at some of the mission statements of like the Gates Foundation for a greener, more sustainable world, or something like that. Like they have these very sort of aspirational goals, which they put into there. So they fund.
Let no child go hungry. Let water be free, or always something very short, very aspirational. Very punchy.
But even if you look at the idea, let water be free. I don't know whose mission statement that is, but that's a very vague and yet very specific goal. So it's water, which is the specificity of it, and free, which is the other specificity. And what does that mean? So you look at all of the programs of this fictitious organization that we are just thinking about, and water is political, right?
Yes.
Getting water. Who has water? Who has to dig a well to get water? So something like that's a great example. Like that sounds really vague, but it's actually very specific at the same time.
I was watching today this new show on Netflix. It was called Down to Earth with Zac Efron, where they go into like different countries and they see how different countries are doing social programs, or they're getting their energy from renewable resources, or they're doing food, like food gardening or whatever. And he went to Paris. They went to Paris, and they saw that Paris actually in the last 10 years has made it so that all water is free. There are no companies privately handling the water, and it was really, really amazing to see the branding that they had for these programs. For this new one program, it was both a program that was kind of like very political, like the water should be free, it is free, it's for every citizen, but it also has this very classic Paris bourgeoisie kind of thing, because they call the organization Eau de Paris, like kind of like
oh yeah. Yes, sounds great.
Yeah, that's where I got the sentence from, subconsciously, I think.
Yeah. Well, I want to address your questions about you want young artists or emerging artists, maybe not young.
Yes.
Us
young emerging artists in our mother's basements trying to make a living in the game.
Well, trying to make a living. So, as we know, a lot of art is not sellable. If you're Agnes Dennis and you're wanting to build, plant 400 trees in the middle of Finland so that over the next 400 years someone will, that's not a sale thing. That's like a grant.
Yeah. Thing. And that's a UN speech thing, basically.
Yeah. So it's there's two different trajectories. One is that I want to make art that has this statement, and I need a grant in order to create these projects that do not involve the art market, so to speak. So how do you want to talk about your art so that it will be interesting to grant makers?
Right.
And again, I think if you're looking to get a Joan Mitchell painting award, go and look at Joan Mitchell painting, the Joan Mitchell Foundation mission statement, and figure out, first of all, if their mission statement aligns with your own thinking, and then create a project that is authentic to your own work, but also aligns with that mission. So you
Right.
kind of want to pull it apart. What is the Mitchell Foundation going to be interested in? Well, they're painting, because Joan Mitchell was a painter. And what is the project you want to work on that speaks to that mission? So that would be something we would unpack in much longer meetings. And then on the other side of that is artists who make work that they want to sell,
Right.
you know, making paintings, objects, etc.
Right.
So what galleries are interested in making and selling work, and then what are the individual galleries interested in? So you need to really understand the business model of those galleries. So there's, I think, contemporary art galleries, you can pick and choose any one, and they'll have a different kinds of artists that they're going to show.
Yeah. And as a painter, I've had to do research on a few galleries on what they want, on who they show, who are their clients. It's very hard to look at their clients list. I mean, it's obviously like always private information. Sometimes they make like a statement like, oh, this very influential politician bought a painting from us or something like that. It's difficult. I mean, I've had very little luck getting into shows, but I'm still young. I'm still trying. But yeah, no, it's been about just like what gallery shows the weird stuff I'm making and how much would it cost to ship my work to them.
Yeah. So if you look at somebody and if you're trying to get a story in the newspaper, or you're trying to get someone to review your work, I mean, there's a couple of examples that I use. I usually like broadcast news there was an article about a woman whose dog was this was terrible. Her dog was incontinent. So the dog would pee, all over the place.
Yeah.
And she started taking photographs of the formations of pee that the dog would make on the sidewalk.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well, of course, that got everybody's attention. Dog lover, people who don't know anything about art are like,
right.
Oh my gosh, that looks like a Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Or if they even know who Jackson Pollock is.
Yeah, we got a real Picasso over here in
exactly.
Oklahoma or whatever.
Yeah. So she got a lot of press on that because it's just sort of a novelty.
Yeah. And also low-key, I think that Hyperallergic would sort of be interested in that, as the late Sunday night article maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the woman obviously wasn't, I guess, to be snobby, like not a serious artist. It was just more like, this is just as good as any of that stuff in that contemporary art wing, kind of thing. So I'm being very judgmental. I don't mean to be, but it's the intention. And then on the other end of the spectrum of something that got into the press quite a bit was the work of Wafa Bilal. His work was very much about contemporary surveillance, and he literally attached a camera to the back of his skull.
Oh.
So it didn't last very long, but the idea was that the idea of how do I see what's behind me?
Right.
And how do I surveil those things that I can't see? So there were and also he's Middle Eastern. Sorry, I can't remember exactly what country he's from, but it was one of the countries that, George Bush designated the axis of evil.
Oh, okay.
And and he, I believe he had a brother who was killed. And this was a kind of novelty story, but it had all these layers. It made you think about, what is surveillance, and to what extent and extremes will we go to get information on other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really interesting concept, and I believe he teaches at Northwestern. So yes, you have many different, and all of the stuff in between, if
Right.
you're a landscape painter, and how do you make the idea of landscape painting contemporary and interesting or not? Are you someone who has your paintings in a craft fair and just sort of make things that are calming and soothing to,
Right.
and at a market price that's reasonable for people going to an art fair? Or are you really interested in being part of this kind of contemporary art conversation and want your work in a certain kind of gallery and reviewed by certain types of journalists?
Right. Which all of these are different, way different worlds.
Yeah,
In
there's
the art,
there's
in the
so
art.
many striations.
Yes. One of my previous mentors told me that there's no art world. There's very many art worlds, and one of them is the, you know, um, crafts and arts market in Asheville, North Carolina, where you sell those little landscape paintings. Another art world.
Yes,
Another
I've
art
seen
world.
that. Somebody said, isn't that like there's a big sort of weekend market there? It's like
Yeah.
in Asheville.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Asheville. I think it's Asheville, North Carolina is, or it's in Georgia. One of those southern states in the East Coast. And it's like right at the tip of Appalachia, and it's they have all these art markets and crafts markets out there in the outdoors, and it looks like an idyllic, like looks kind of hippie-ish. Not to just put it in a box, but it looks like a very hippie-ish market.
Well, that's a great example. It would be, do I want to be an artist whose goal is that I sell and am successful within that universe?
Right.
Right. Which is totally legitimate. You can actually make money.
Yeah.
And if you know your audience really well, you can make a lot of money.
Yeah, but you have to always understand that you have to be clear on where you want to go. There was one artist that I knew that would talk to my boss in a place I worked at, who would always tell her, it's like, I'm trying to get out of the arts fair. I just can't get out of it, and no one else will see what I'm doing. No one else will no one else will have my work, only the art fairs. And it's strange how, I mean, I felt very bad for him because he was very frustrated about it. But it's kind of like, you're making the artwork that is in that sphere. I mean, he did beautiful paintings of trees, basically, and he got to a point where he drew so many trees that he developed sort of like a Zen brush calligraphy style of it. And I just looked at him, and having worked at a gallery that basically did installations of sand and Italian stocking sculptures from an Italian designer, and I coming from the opposite, and I'm just like, yeah, man, no one in the place you want to go to is ever going to look at this and be like, yeah, that's my jam, like they're looking at sand and stockings sculptures basically at this point.
Yeah. And if you want to be out of that kind of environment, how do you pivot yourself?
Exactly.
How do you make what you do interesting? I mean, if you look at a painter like Wayne Thiebaud, who for a long time made, the pictures of the cakes and cupcakes in the deli cases, right, and why those are so beloved, even amongst contemporary artists. And then you look at his landscape paintings, and he just had this, you could just tell that this was a person who made so many of these, that right, he had a way in which he could just lay the paint down on the canvas that made it look, transcendent, like gave it depth and perspective and color, and like just a genius way of making paint lie down on the canvas in a way that's sort of magical. Yeah, and in painting classes, we have studied Wayne Thiebaud as well, sort of just as there's a lot of like
theory that goes into mark making, which is very surprising for me. You know, as a painter, sometimes I just get amazed on how much ink has been spilled over, like, what is a paint mark, you know? I think that's why Wayne Thiebaud's work is loved a lot. He was coming in from a time where what he was doing was, you know, rather new. And when he did his landscapes, whoa, look out, you know?
Yeah, they're just so,
Yeah,
he did it with such ease.
exactly. Yeah.
And just, he knew exactly what mark to make because he had put in whatever his 10,000 hours or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And it was
and
almost
you could see that.
yeah. It was almost as decadent as the actual things he was painting, because when you look at how thick the oil is doing, and if you're a painter and you're, you know, right now I'm sort of having a red paint drought, and I'm sort of saying like, oh God, like I can't afford another big tube of red, you know. And then and then I look at Wayne Thiebaud's work or something like that, and he just used to paint with such abandon, you know, that it is just as decadent as the actual pastries he did, just as expensive, if not more.
Yeah.
A lot to say about that, but you're right. It is about how does your work as an organization or a painter or a sculptor, where does it fit? Who would be interested in it, and for what reason, right?
Yeah. I mean, if that's what you're interested in, I think there's also the idea that, you know, you're very dedicated to your work and you just kind of get to a point where you plateau, and you just need to get, you know, maybe a story written about you, or you need to make people aware of who you are.
Right.
And now we have things like Instagram, and we have, you know, all the tools.
Right.
That, yeah. What hashtags do you use? I don't know. I mean,
oh yeah, Instagram. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, working with Instagram professionally has sucked the joy out of Instagram for me.
Yeah. I just got hacked on Instagram.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Someone found my password and they started using it in some tiny little town in Arizona. And I'm like,
oh God, I'm sorry.
Why? You know?
I always get scams. People know I'm an artist, and I get these non-existent art magazines selling like, hey, we want to give you a full frontal page. We want to give you like
I know.
10-page spread, and like, please give us your work. And like, it's like the first time I got them, I'm just like, finally, my big break. Here I come, world, you know. And then like,
I'll pay them the $300.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. And then I was looking for their website. I mean, I'm very lucky that I learned from my gallery days in DC, where it was like, yeah, always look for the website. Always look for the website. And I was like, all right, let's see what the website is. And they were just like, I Googled them, and then it was just like, this magazine's a scam, or like 4, you know, links in a row just going like, yeah, don't do it. And it turns out like you have to be very smart. I mean, for all the young artists that are just starting out on Instagram, I mean, there's people that will offer you the world and more, and those are the people you don't want to like talk to. I mean, no one's going to come up and offer you a front page spread on their magazine without you talking to them first, basically.
Yeah. If it seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true.
It is too good to be true.
Yeah.
And oh my God, it was just heart-wrenching to know that it was just,
yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, not only that, not only do they keep the money you sent them, they keep, somehow when you send them the picture and you agree to like the, you know, infinitely long list of terms and conditions, because no one reads those. When you agree to it, you give them the rights to use your images as much as they want without having to pay for it or give you credit or say who you are.
Yeah.
So, not only that, they just end up using your paintings as or your artwork as a means to scam other artists into it. So that's one lesson for the kids out there. Just
kids, don't do it.
Block them, or just harass them back. That's what I would do. Yeah,
Yeah, and
Instagram is
have a way to, I mean, have an elevator pitch so when people ask you about your work, be able to sort of boil it down.
yeah,
Because the worst thing you can do is kind of bore someone with your long-winded treatise on
yeah,
your artwork. That, I mean, what I said to you at the beginning of the interview is sort of the elevator pitch I had to
Mhm.
write. And mine was, I help artists and institutions create language, visual identities, and messages that resonate with new audiences, the media, and potential funders.
Right,
So that kind of tells you, it gives you enough information
right.
so that you can ask more questions. I think you
Mm.
want people to leave sort of wondering, well, what does that mean
Yeah,
exactly? Oh,
yeah,
I want more funders. I want to get into the media. I want,
exactly.
I need a brand identity.
Yeah.
What? I want to hire you.
I mean, I sort of redo my elevator speech for Invisible Activity podcast every time I do the intro for the show. Every time I write it, I write it a little differently, and I've gone back and re-listened to the first one, and I was like, what the fuck was I saying? Like, two words out of those made sense, and I realized there's always this one craving for artists is like to make their artwork or their art show or their art space to be very interesting and be like conceptually different and all that. And my girlfriend once sent me, I mean, I'm not gonna be able to find a link and I hate myself for it, but it was like because the elevator pitch that they put on their front page of the website was like, we aim to create a multi-dimensional space for like a congruence of dialogues, meaningful discussions, and all that. But like the language was so Byzantine, like multi-dimensional spaces. Like, wait, there's more than
What
three
does that
dimensions?
mean?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
does that mean? What does that mean? So for the elevator speech, I found like for the first time when I was introducing invisible activity, I try to make it like, yeah, we're trying to pump out all these cross-pollinating ideas into the airwaves
Yeah.
of the internet to be caught by all these other perceivers, and it's kind of like, slow down, your
Yeah.
elevator
Well, I'm
speech
going to
needs to
turn the
be
tables on you. How do you describe invisible? What is it called? Invisible what?
invisible activity. So the name in itself suggests people that
Is
are
it
doing
like
things.
199% invisible, that Roman Mars podcast?
Yeah. My girlfriend and I would listen to that, and I think I subconsciously named it like that, or it was kind of like that, or it was going to be called invisible action.
So what does invisible activity mean?
So I always wanted it to focus on things that people were doing either here locally or or projects that were being done that were not going to be shown in a major news website or anything like that, but were regardless worthy of being promoted or being asked or being interviewed. So invisible activity felt like a good name because it's activity that is going on, that is bubbling under the surface, but you're not seeing it. Uh,
Mm. So
and
it's like your in-studio production time and where all the creative sausage gets made.
Yes, basically, and I'm sort of like, the podcast is to lift the veil of the internet, and bring people into projects that are really cool that you wouldn't be noticing otherwise. And I guess one of my latest iterations. Let me actually get the first one if I can catch it, so I can show you how bad it was.
I love to see the bad stuff.
Yeah, because it's like, it was so bad, and I re-listened to it, and I was just like, good God, like, I read it, and I was just like I speak like I have an MFA or something like that. Let me see, reference. No,
Do you use the word agitprop and solipsism in it?
no, I don't, but I assume.
Try to stay away from those words
Yeah, wait,
in
what
your
was the first
elevator
term?
speech.
Oh, what's the first term?
Agitprop.
Agitprop. What is that?
I don't know. I mean, agitprop. Every single time I use that word, I have to look it up. That's not good. I
I
should
know
know
that.
this.
If you're a solipsist, you're in a very bad place to communicate
Yeah.
with people.
Well, agitprop is political propaganda, especially in art and literature.
Okay, so basically I guess that's the new buzzword.
I don't know. I mean, I've heard people using that word in like it's an art speak kind of a word.
Right, agitprop.
And I'm always just like, I guess I'm allergic a little bit to certain kinds of erudite language.
Yeah.
Something that can be said more simply. But sometimes agitprop, meaning propaganda, propaganda.
Right.
Agit, I'm not sure where that, it must have I know it has a derivation somewhere. But anyway, I find those things fascinating. Words like that.
There was no, I can't find my file. I cannot find my shitty one. I think I deleted it out of disgust. And that's bad because I like to keep track of all my progress. The one for this episode is, let me read it. We are a podcast dedicated to giving a platform to independent artists, writers, community leaders, and otherwise interesting people with something to say. We wish to cover ideas that focus on engaging the community, addressing issues of justice and social reform, and help us imagine how tomorrow can be different. It's sort of like, it's a little
That's
long.
not bad. I like the first sentence. You could have just stopped it there.
Really, just that? Yeah.
It's that vague and specific.
Vague and specific.
Because it leaves you open. It leaves you in a situation where you can be kind of outside of what the second part of that statement. Right. You end up closing yourself a little bit off, I think, in that second part, where the first part leaves you much more open.
Right. Well, I'll change it before I record it then. so then everybody listening will listen to the intro, which I'll record later on than now.
Yeah.
And then they'll listen to me saying now, and they'll be like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Well, that's this is exactly what I do with people. Yeah. When I sit them down and talk to them, like sometimes it's just another set of eyes, another set of ears,
right?
That can kind of look at what you're doing and say, "Oh, the second part, you don't need that." Exactly. You want something that's going to leave you a lot of possibilities. It's going to lead you to ways in which you can continue to evolve, should you want to, do that.
And it's not the thing to be a bard when you write these things. I mean, it's definitely not poetry. It's more like social science and how to get people interested, basically.
Yeah. I actually want to look at a couple of mission statements.
Now, are you allowed to say them?
Mission statements?
Yes. Are they from clients or stuff?
Am I allowed to say who my clients are?
No, I don't think you are, right?
I mean, I don't like to, because I think people want to feel, oh wait, here's a couple of good ones. Not that it's a big secret or anything, but, 17 truly inspiring company vision and mission statements, examples. The Alzheimer's Association, a world without Alzheimer's disease.
Very to the point.
To the point.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft, a computer on every desk and in every home. That's very aspirational.
Yep.
Facebook, connect with friends and the world around you.
Very dishonest, but very to the point, yeah.
Disney's got a really long one, which I think is signed. That's not good, even though they're they say to entertain, inform, and inspire people around the globe through the power of unparalleled storytelling, reflecting the iconic brands, creative minds, and innovative technologies that make ours the world's premier entertainment company.
Yeah, they lost
then
me.
You've got like the MoMA mission statement.
Give me more money. That's it.
Give me more money, yeah. So the MoMA mission statement is it's really, they changed theirs recently. The Museum of Modern Art is dedicated to being the foremost museum of modern art in the world. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So modern art. But they changed it at one point to embrace the word contemporary.
I think
But they've
that's more
got
of a hit word now.
what?
I think that's more of a hit word now because, well, I guess like academically it would make more sense since modernism and modern art are kind of like a past thing now.
Yeah. But people still conflate that to mean contemporary.
Right.
But a place like MoMA doesn't have the luxury of that. But anyway, I think we're good. Do you want to?
No, I think we're good. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your wisdom on, I mean, just very basic things. I think a lot of people will benefit just from very basic approaches to getting their story right. Their story,
Yeah.
And who will they say it to? I think I mean, that's already a
and know your audience.
writers.
Like draw pictures of the groovy guy and gal that you want to, and figure out like where do they work.
Make avatars and everything.
Yeah, like personas. Like come up with like, I want Joe Schmo of Hipster Nation to be coming to my events or something. Right. And why? What can I do to get Joe Schmo to show up?
Right. Well, for all the Joe Schmoes and for all the Joe Schmoes and what would be his spouse's name? Schmally Alleys. This has been Invisible Activity, and this has been Elizabeth Burke-Dain. A link to her website and her contact information will be left in the description. And there we are. I think we can wrap it up now.
All right. Thanks a lot, Gabriel.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. See you soon. Bye.
Yeah.